welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 380, and today's date is June 2nd, 2014, and the title of this episode is the U.S. planning a first strike nuclear attack on Russia and China? And when we look at the bigger picture, what do we see? We see NATO and the United States government central bankers positioning military assets all over the world, specifically for China and Russia so they can contain them. We see in Japan, they're moving their base to a different location so they can bring in more sophisticated weapons. We see in Guam, there is a missile deployment center there. We see in South Korea, they're bringing in the THAAD system to set up a missile shield there, and they're saying it's because of North Korea and, of course, China. We see from Poland to Romania, they're bringing in more sophisticated missile systems into that region. NATO is moving military assets all over the world to contain and circle around Russia and China. And there are documents out there that state that, yes, the United States could be planning some type of first strike nuclear attack on Russia and China. We're going to get into that a little bit later in this report. But let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, the ISM originally released some data, and of course, they said, here's the data, and everyone looked at it, and it was much, much worse than expected. And then they said, whoa, that is not the right data. We have different data. And then they re-released the data, and of course, that wasn't correct either, so they released it one more time. And what has happened here is they are trying to cover up this entire collapse by changing the information. And what they actually changed when they re-released the ISM revisions was new orders. They had it down by 53.3%, and they revised it up to 56.9%. Production they had down around 55.2, and they re-released it to 61. Employment, it was around 51.9, and they re-released the numbers to 52.8. And they're continually doing this because they need to keep this illusion alive. Of course, when they issued these numbers originally, someone probably saw it and said, whoa, what are you doing here? We can't give people the real numbers. We have to revise them, manipulate them a little bit, just like we do with GDP, inflation, unemployment. You just can't give out numbers like this. And again, this is all part of the economic illusion here in the United States. They need to keep it alive, and this is exactly what they're doing. Now, we see that information came out about construction spending, and U.S. construction spending rose a mere 0.2% month-on-month, missing the 0.7% expectations by the most since March 2013. And what's very interesting is that we are in the hot season of real estate in building homes and building pretty much everything, because this is the warm weather and we are not seeing anything really happening. And when you look at this, this tells you that after we come out of this spring and summer area, it is going to completely fall apart. Now, what's very interesting, Black Knight's April Mortgage Monitor shows almost 2 million modifications face interest rate resets, and 40% of those resets are underwater. In addition, another 18% of modified borrowers have 9% equity or less in their homes. Given that the data has shown quite clearly that equity, or the lack thereof, is one of the primary drivers of mortgage defaults, these resets may indeed pose an increased risk in the years ahead. Well, it's going to be a huge risk, because what we're seeing right now is mortgage originations are completely imploding on themselves. New construction, they can't move these homes. The investment hedge fund companies are continually buying these houses in cash, and mortgage departments are laying off people left and right. And this is on the thousands upon thousands of people that are being laid off. So you can see this real estate market is not getting better. It is getting worse. We are in the hot season right now, and this will start to cool off by the end of July, because people normally want to be in their homes before school starts so their children can go to school, and usually this starts to slow down right after July. And what we're going to see right now is that this real estate market is going to come to a screeching halt. We're going to see mortgage originations completely fall apart. Banks will continually lay off those people in the mortgage departments. And of course, the Fed will probably tell the investment company and hedge funds to ramp up their cash purchases to keep this market afloat and the bubble going. And when this bubble pops, it is going to come down extremely hard. And those people that are flipping, those people who are doing speculative buying, we're going to see the same thing happen that happened back in 2008 when people didn't realize what was really going on and they were holding on to all these homes. It's going to come crashing around them. They're going to be stuck with these homes, and you're going to see foreclosures all over the place. Okay, now it looks like Ecuador is going to transfer half its gold reserves to Goldman Sachs in exchange for liquidity. Ooh, this is a real bad move. Ecuador agreed to transfer more than half its gold reserves to Goldman Sachs Group for 3 years as the government seeks to bolster liquidity. The central bank said it will send 466,000 ounces of gold to Goldman Sachs, worth about $580 million at current prices, and get the same amount back 3 years from now. Ecuador will get instruments of high security and liquidity and expects to earn a profit of $16 million to $20 million over the term of the accord. This gold is headed, guess where? Away from Ecuador. They will never, ever see this again. It will never be returned to this country. It'll probably end up going to the Fed, and then, of course, this gold will then be dispersed to either China, Russia, or whoever is looking for their gold, and they will never see this gold again. Now, it looks like Wall Street is very concerned over China hoarding the gold. They continually purchase it, but they never sell it at a higher price. They just keep it. And what we're seeing right now is that the banks like Goldman Sachs, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, what they do is they purchase gold and they take it on and then they sell it back to the Fed. And of course, when the prices are good, they sell it back and it's returned back to the Fed. But what China is doing is they're purchasing the gold and they're never selling it from they're not selling it back into the market. They're actually keeping it, and then they go out and they buy even more gold. And they're saying that this measure is absolutely useless because China is hoarding the gold and does not follow the rules. When it sees that gold prices are going down, the first thing it does is buy them, and it does not sell when prices continue to fall. It seems that Wall Street cannot do anything to counter China on this. The analyst said that the People's Bank of China is putting pressure on Washington and Wall Street as the U.S. dollar has been linked with gold prices since its rise as the leading global currency. The Fed hopes to manipulate gold prices in its favor, but the Chinese central bank is standing in its way, and they're making it much, much difficult for everyone else because they're continually buying more and more gold. Russia's doing the same thing, and we can see right now the United States hasn't really been purchasing gold. I can't find anywhere that they're actually purchasing any type of gold. Now, the BRIC nations, the 5 BRIC nations, will likely to agree to fund their $100 billion development effort, giving them the same rights in a new multilateral bank that could start lending in 2 years. The new bank would symbolize the growing influence of emerging economies in the global financial architecture, long dominated by the United States and Europe through the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. Leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are expected to sign a treaty to launch the bank officially when they meet at BRICS Summit in the northern Brazilian city of Fortaleza on July 15th. Now, what's very interesting is the BRICS are creating this new bank to combat the IMF and World Bank, and we see China continually making deals all around the world. They're setting up clearinghouses, they're making bilateral trade agreements, and we understand that New Zealand made a bilateral trade agreement with China with the yuan, which would bypass the US dollar, and now they are doing it with London. The Yuan Clearing Bank will be officially appointed in the United Kingdom in June. There will be a clearing bank in London. In due course, there will be an announcement that's going to be made. He said, and this is coming from Mr. Bolit, he said another key announcement is expected on Chinese banks opening new branches in the UK. So they are making deals, they are spreading this around, and the yuan, renminbi are really making gains around the world. Now, the U.S. government, central bankers, they see what's going on. They understand that China and Russia, they're making deals with each other. China's making deals all around the world, setting up clearinghouses, making bilateral trade agreements. They see the Middle East is falling apart. Ukraine isn't going as planned, and now they're in Central Africa trying to capture as many countries as they possibly can and keep this system propped up. And they realize that this Bretton Woods system that was created back in World War II, and of course we came off the gold standard in 1971, it is completely falling apart. It is at the end of its life cycle. This is why we see what is going on around the world happening at this time. This is why we see all the provoking and all the hot points all around the world. This is why we see the United States central bankers going into each one of these countries, taking them over, setting up a puppet regime. They don't care about freedom, democracy, as long as they maintain the control of the country and keep that private Western central bank in the country and keep their resources on the dollar. They are happy because they need to start something, which is an event, to get this war started, to cover up what is going. Because after this entire war is over, they do believe they're going to reset the system. And right now, former Fed chairman, he is out there, and this is Paul Volcker. He is doing exactly what I thought they wanted to do, and here he is saying that, you know what, we're looking at this old system right now, and this international financial crisis seems at least as frequent and more destructive in impeding economic stability and growth, and this old Bretton Woods system needs to go, and we need to create a new one. We need to reset it. And this is what they're trying to do. They realize that we are at the end game. This economy is falling apart. The debt is way too high. It cannot be sustained. Each one of these countries in the EU are having troubles. Unemployment is continually rising. The debt is continually rising. People can't make ends meet. We see it here in the United States. Unemployment is manipulated. GDP is manipulated. Inflation is manipulated, all to keep this economic illusion alive, because they realize they need to blame what is coming on another country. They do not want to be blamed on what is going to happen, because they realize they will need to reset the entire system. And they would like to reset it. And of course, they're going to want to get rid of the Constitution. They don't want people to have rights. They want a one world government, and they want to control what is completely going on all over the place. Now, the World Bank is out there, and they're warning of food riots and rising food prices. And of course, they name everything except what's really going on. And a new report issued by the World Bank warns that food prices are skyrocketing globally, with wheat up about 18%, corn up about 12%. According to the World Bank, these prices increases have been caused primarily by three factors: higher demand in food from China, U.S. drought conditions that hammered wheat production, unrest in Ukraine due to the near state of war with Russia. Now, they named everything except what is really going on here: the destruction of our monetary system, the devaluing of the U.S. dollar, of the EU, the destruction of what is coming. Because what we're seeing here in the United States, let's just take an example here of what's going on in the United States. Now, we see that food prices are going up all over the place. We're seeing other prices go up all over the place. This is because of the value of the dollar is continually decreasing. This is why we see prices going up. But they didn't want to mention that. They like to mention all the other factors except what is actually going on here. And we can see that the central banks and the countries around the world are removing the dollar from their reserves. And we can see back in 2000, 55% of countries' central banks held the dollar in reserves. Now it's about 33%. By the end of this year, they're saying it's going to be around 20 to 25%. And as they remove the dollar from the reserves, those dollars come back here to the United States and floods the market and devalues the dollar, and this is what we're seeing, and this is why it's getting more and more difficult for people to go out and actually purchase that food. Because, like I said, I went out to buy Florida orange juice, Florida natural orange juice, and that price of that container skyrocketed. This has nothing to do with China demanding more. This has nothing to do with the drought, because there is no drought in Florida, and this is where the oranges actually come from. They're all picked here in Florida, and we can see right now that this has nothing to do with that. And we're seeing other prices go up that have absolutely nothing to do with anything that they're talking about except for the devaluing of the dollar. And when the dollar is devalued, prices go up. And yes, eventually this will lead to food riots, because when you're here in the United States or in the EU and you go and purchase that milk, or you purchase the orange juice, or try to purchase bread, and you're looking at $25, $45, yeah, people are not going to be able to handle themselves, and things are going to get a little bit out of hand, and they're going to go and, start riots and break into places to try to get that food. And we're definitely going to see that happen. This is all part of the economic collapse. That's all it is. Okay, now let's go down to Venezuela here. Now we see the same thing starting to happen in Venezuela that happened in Ukraine. The protests are going to start getting a little bit more violent, and right now it looks like Obama wants Venezuela looking like Ukraine. He wants a fascist replacing Democrats. He wants Washington dictated Venezuelan policy. Obama wants Maduro ousted. He wants him dead. On May 28th, U.S. House members overwhelmingly passed legislation mandating sanctions against Venezuela. They have a huge amount of oil in Venezuela. They want to go down there. They want that oil on the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. They want to set up a private Western central bank, and they're going to do whatever they can to make this happen. Just like they did it in Ukraine, you will see the protesters getting more violent. You'll see attempts made on Maduro's life, and they're going to push this agenda forward just like they do in Syria, just like they did in Ukraine, and this will not stop. They are pushing their agenda forward, and they will continually do this until they get what they want. Now, yesterday I reported that Ukraine was going to give a token payment to Gazprom/Russia of about $786 million, and it looks like Russia/Gazprom confirmed that they have received that money, and this is the payment for gas deliveries in February and March. Gazprom had postponed the introduction of an advance payment scheme for Ukraine until June 9th to give Kiev an opportunity to pay for the May gas deliveries. The May payment is also due before June 9th at this time. Now, there's some analysts out there saying that this might inhibit Ukraine receiving more EU financial aid, or it may undermine foreign investment in the Ukrainian Authority government, the puppet regime, because their ability to pay is really not there. It looks like they don't have the cash. It looks like they hem and haw when they have to pay their bills, and there might be a problem of them receiving more aid down the line. Now, we see the horrific treatment of Ukrainian people is continuing in Lugansk, in Donetsk, in Kharkov, and it looks like there was an air raid on Lugansk. Russia on Monday condemned the Kiev authorities' air raid on the eastern Ukrainian city of Lugansk. The Kiev authorities committed another crime against their own people as a result of a bombardment by the Ukrainian Armed Forces aviation of the building of the Lugansk Region State Administration. People, civilians, were killed in this airstrike. And again, this completely violates the Geneva Statement of April 17th. And I'm going to tell you right now, the Ukrainian government, the puppet regime, the anti-terrorism forces, the paid mercenaries, they don't care. You have to remember who is in this country at this time. They've taken Syrian paid mercenaries, moved them into Ukraine. We're seeing other paid mercenaries in the country. They are handling the attacks, and again, they will not stop until they get the southeastern section. They actually want the entire country, and it's completely falling apart, so they're going to continue with their operation. They want the entire country, and they will not stop with trying to get it. Now, we see a couple of reports ago, I reported that the Ukrainian puppet regime, puppet government, was trying to block the water supply to Crimea, and it looks like the water supply to Crimea through the northern Crimea Canal has been nearly fully blocked by a temporary dam. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe said in a report on Monday after inspection of the Kherson region in southeastern Ukraine. So now they've blocked the water going into Crimea. They have told everyone they will get Crimea back. They will get southeastern sections under control, and we have to remember the IMF said, and this is coming from the bankers, you take control of Ukraine or you're not getting the money. And the bankers are running the show. And it looks like Russia and China are moving toward a formal alliance. In the joint statement issued by Russia and China, the main message is that China-Russia relations have reached a new stage of comprehensive strategic partnership, and this will help increase both countries' international status and influence, thus contributing to a more just international order. Of particular importance is the agreement that China and Russia will deepen cooperation under the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building in Asia, a new security framework in Asia-Pacific that conveniently excludes the U.S. and Japan. So we can see how all these countries are now taking sides. We see NATO and the private Western Central Bank countries, and we see the BRIC nations on the other side. And of course, if they do not have a private Western Central Bank, they are the enemy. Okay, now we understand that the United States is running the show in Ukraine, and along with the central bankers and a lot of European countries, and we can see right now that the United States has decided to give $18 million of military financial aid. Now we see the junta in Ukraine coming down on the people in Ukraine. They're using force, they're killing civilians, and they're giving them military aid. Now in Syria, which is very interesting, they've been using the story that Assad is very mean to his people. He's been killing civilians. He's been, hurting his own people. Well, look at the two instances right now. Their stories don't even match. So we're giving, the United States central bankers are giving $18 million to hurt the civilians who do not want to be part of this puppet regime. And we're backing the opposition to get Assad out of the country, where they're saying that he is hurting his own people. So you can see, no matter what happens, they're talking on both sides of their mouth. The United States central bankers don't care. If they're in control, again, those people are terrorists. They don't care about them. If they're not in control of that country, then the opposition is there, and they're going to fund them to take out the government of that country so they can put the puppet regime in there. This is how it works. Now, Russia is out there, and they're saying that they're going to take necessary measures if NATO military potential comes closer to its borders. They are getting prepared because they see what NATO's doing. Ukraine right now is holding a referendum to join NATO, and they're bringing military assets closer and closer and closer. And of course, Russia is getting nervous, just like China is getting nervous, and they see that the United States central bankers and NATO and all the other private Western central banker countries are now encroaching and moving in and encircling, because they really kind of understand what's going on here, that these central bankers will go down kicking and screaming because they will not give up the reserve currency. They will fight to the bitter end, and of course they have bunkers underground. They don't have to worry about what's going to go on up top, and when it's all over, they're going to emerge. And again, like I said, former Fed Paul Volcker said, we need a new Bretton Woods system, and this is exactly what they want to do. Now, there was a document that was released, and this was on TruthSeeker, and what this says is U.S. plans first strike nuclear attack on Russia or China. And I'm going to read through the script here of what has been going on and what has been released here. Now, their secret clauses of NATO membership state the U.S. can and will depose Europe's governments on the orders of the White House. Even if the electorate were to show a different inclination, secret protocols guarantee alignment by any means. By any means means exactly that. Early NATO whistleblower Hans Otto exposed kill list of leading European politicians that defied investigators' belief but were subsequently confirmed by police. The documents state that these assassinations would take place in case of X. X may refer, writes NATO scholar Dr. Daniel Gassner, to mass protests against a U.S.-backed government or an election victory of genuinely left-wing party. Instructions for such operations were kept at NATO military headquarters south of Brussels. Der Spiegel reveals a quote, a strictly secured wing of the building, a gray steel bank vault door prohibits trespassing to the unauthorized. Papers on NATO operations in Europe are marked American eyes only. When the EU Parliament officially demanded NATO stop these operations, which have become known by the codename Gladio, the U.S. simply ignored it. NATO is attempting to supersede and actually replace the United Nations, reveals former Assistant General Hans Sponeck. The doctrine reserves the rights to intervene anywhere in the world where there is a movement of large number of persons. Obama's foreign policy guru, Brzezinski, calls people in countries under U.S. control vassals. This is a medieval term for slaves. American armed forces are now in over 150 countries. The unofficial figure, including clandestine U.S. forces, is thought to be much higher. Obama today clearly states, and with conviction, Americans' commitment to seek the peace and security of the world without nuclear weapons. Now, he made this statement, but what happened was, since he made that statement, he mushroomed nuclear weapons spending to levels above the height of the Cold War. He has expanded the infamous Bush doctrine of nuclear strike against any country, regardless of international law. This is called full spectrum dominance, is the official term used by his administration, meaning control everything, everywhere on sea, land, air, space, and outer space. U.S. Space Command documents plan to even deny other nations the use of space. The one remaining power with the capacity to stop what the Pentagon calls full spectrum dominance, writes intelligence analyst Willem Engdahl, is Russia. By design or coincidence, crisis in Ukraine provided the perfect excuse for U.S. military control of the region. 10 days ago, the administration tested its Star Wars system for Eastern Europe, which will now be rolled out starting in Romania. Obama brands his system the stronger, smarter, and swifter version of Ronald Reagan's initial Star Wars program. Under the plan, the U.S. attacks Russia with nuclear weapons, while NATO missiles defense in Eastern Europe mops up any attempted response. So basically what's going to happen, under this plan, U.S. attacks Russia, most likely China, and all those missile shields that have been put in place with these more sophisticated weapons are going to try at least to stop the attacks coming back to the United States. MSNBC News writes, it is almost likely and understandable Russia interprets NATO Star Wars deployment on its border as an unofficial declaration of war. And we can see what's happening. NATO, the United States government, central bankers have been positioning themselves for quite a while right now. They're encircling China and Russia. We've been talking about this for quite a while. Military assets are being put into place. More sophisticated weapons are being put into place. And you can see how this is starting to unfold at this time. Now, with former Fed Chairman Volcker out there saying that they want to start a new Bretton Woods system, they're trying to remove the UN and place the NATO in charge of what is going on here because NATO has the forces to do what they needed to do. So we can see how they're pushing this agenda forward. And they're not going to stop. Just like in Ukraine, when everyone thought they were having the peace conference, oh, they're hashing out the details. There was absolutely no peace. They didn't meet again, and the anti-terrorism forces continued to roll ahead, killing civilians, killing people. They didn't care. Now, we understand they're going to use some type of an event to carry this through. Now, we understand the first strike doesn't mean all of a sudden the United States and Europe is going to strike. The war is going to get started. It's going to start with some type of an event. And as the war is going along, they will make a first strike and it will go nuclear. This is what's going to happen. And what we're seeing right now is the build-up to this event. We see what's happening in Syria. We see what's happening in Libya. We see the exercises going on in Jordan right now. We see the removal of all the government officials from the United States from Syria. They closed the embassies. Now the paid mercenaries are the government of choice for Syria. And right now, the U.S. House of Representatives is demanding a rundown of any chemical warfare materials that Syria's government may be trying to hide. An intelligence authorization bill passed by the chamber on Friday would compel the Obama administration to send Congress an assessment of any undeclared chemical weapons stockpile, munitions, and facilities held by President Assad. Assad's regime has given other governments custody of all but roughly 7% of their chemical weapons. They are still stuck in the country right now. They cannot get them out. U.S. and other Western intelligence reported suggest that the regime remains capable of deploying chemical weapons, including materials it may have concealed from the international inspectors. And we went back. Well, I reported about this back in 2013 in around December or so when CNN came out and said that Assad is hiding chemical weapons. They were using this as propaganda to build up the next event. This is exactly what's going on. Tomorrow is the elections for Assad on June 3rd. We've seen that election results coming around from other countries are completely positive for Assad, and this is going to completely mess up their entire story that Assad is coming down on his people. And of course, they're saying these elections aren't real. They're corrupt, and they're doing everything they possibly can to, get these elections completely off track right now. Even the Syrian paid mercenaries are stepping up attacks as these elections are moving forward. And they're going to continually do this. And once the elections are over, we're going to see some type of an event occur because they're going to have to do this quite quickly because they're building up the forces in Jordan. They have an assault ship off of Libya. You will see more ships come into the Mediterranean, and we can see they're not doing all this for no reason. They're doing this because they have a strategic, specific plan, and they know they can't just run into Syria, so they need some type of an event to get into Syria. And what is that going to be? Most likely, it's going to be something here in the United States. Within Europe, we have to remember the State Department has already been sending out explosives to embassies around the world and to other unknown locations. They've been telling us that Syria is a launching pad for terrorists. And of course, David Cameron is out there, and he's saying that Syria terror threat is completely more dangerous than Afghanistan or Pakistan. It is much, much worse. Prime Minister claims security services are working hard to prevent a terror attack as jihadists return to the UK from Syria. In some of his strongest remarks about the impact of the civil war in the broken state of Syria, the Prime Minister said that the police and security services in Britain were having to work hard to prevent these terror attacks that are coming. Cameron, who will discuss the fallout of the Syrian civil war with Barack Obama after the G7 summit in Brussels on Thursday, said, "We've got to deal with this incipient terrorist threat from Syria. It is now the biggest risk we face, bigger even than what has happened in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So they are pushing this forward. And what's very interesting is that the Department of Justice right now is ordering malware. Why would they need malware? The Department of Justice on June 2nd has posted a solicitation on the Federal Business Opportunities website looking for a contractor to provide them with malware, stating their interest with malware as being solely research related to provide actionable intelligence to the investigator in both criminal and intelligence matters. I'm going to say I don't believe them at this point. I believe they want an outside team to come up with a malware that they can use. They have very specific requirements of what they need it to do, and I believe they're going to be using this for what is coming, and that is the next event. Now, the FBI is out there, and they are on a nationwide manhunt for an armed and dangerous political consultant. Authorities in the United States are conducting a coast-to-coast manhunt for a San Francisco, California man suspected of getting his hands on a cache of explosives and believed to be armed and dangerous. Ryan Kelly Chamberlain II on Saturday, where officials executed a search warrant but were unable to locate the suspect. A crew of 24 FBI agents, hazardous material personnel, police officers, and firefighters were on the scene when the raid was carried out. They went into his home, they found explosives, and of course, anyone that has explosives, they are a terrorist. And they don't know if he's working alone or not, or planning something big. They've lost track of him. They don't know where he is. So it is a complete nationwide manhunt for this person. Now again, this could be playing into the next event where they can say these people are running around. He's been reading, the Al-Qaeda magazines, building bombs, and we can see how they're playing this up over and over and building this propaganda to make us believe that Syria is going to be responsible because Al-Qaeda is coming from Syria. They're the launching pad of terrorists, and we can see how this is completely playing out. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.